Walk into any university humanities department today, and you will find a syllabus organized under a single imposing heading: theory. This academic umbrella sorts these disciplines into a massive, interconnected web, lumping disparate philosophical traditions into one continuous survey course. Grouping these traditions together creates an epistemological paradox. It treats entirely different fields of study as interchangeable lenses you can swap out to read a text, ignoring the reality that these frameworks have entirely different end goals. Literary theory is an epistemological project. At its core, it is strictly concerned with the mechanisms of language. It asks how a text generates meaning, how forms are structured, and how readers process narrative. Critical theory is a materialist project. It operates as a diagnostic tool to expose the ideological structures and asymmetric power dynamics of society. It asks who benefits from a given system and how human beings are alienated by economic and cultural forces. Conflating these two frameworks hides a structural divide. It blurs the line between interpreting the aesthetics of a self-contained object and actively attempting to emancipate human society from oppression. The trajectory of literary theory begins with classical definitions of form. Going back to Aristotle's Poetics, the premise was that a text is a self-contained object. You read it to understand its internal symmetry, its plot mechanisms, and its poetic economy. By the 20th century, movements like Formalism and New Criticism hardened this boundary. They developed techniques of close reading that deliberately severed the text from its author's biography and its historical context, treating the poem or the novel as an autonomous artifact. The post-structuralist shift fractured this stability. Theorists argue that because a text is built on language, and language itself is unstable, a text can never possess a single fixed meaning. Formal symmetry dissolved into overlapping language games. Jacques Derrida pushed this concept to its limit through deconstruction. He revealed how words only possess meaning through their difference from other words, causing language to constantly defer and destabilize the very concepts it tries to communicate. Yet, whether analyzing the rigid symmetry of a sonnet or the fractured instability of a postmodern novel, the end goal of literary theory remains bound to the page. Its ultimate target is decoding the text itself. Critical theory originates from a profound historical disappointment. Founded in 1923, the scholars of the Frankfurt School watched the working-class revolutions in Western Europe fail. To explain why, they departed from orthodox Marxist economic determinism, realizing they needed a broader focus on culture and ideology. In 1937, Max Horkheimer formalized this break. He rejected what he called traditional theory, the standard scientific method of merely observing, categorizing, and describing facts. Horkheimer argued that treating society like a neutral object implicitly legitimizes the capitalist status quo. This flowchart compares the two approaches. Traditional theory uses a linear classification to optimize society as it currently exists. Critical theory introduces the mechanism of innate critique. It measures the society against its own stated ideals, like freedom and democracy, to expose the structural contradictions preventing those ideals from becoming reality. This shifts the analytical focus entirely. Instead of examining an isolated artifact, critical theory maps the ideological force field surrounding it, treating what we call common sense as the historical product of human activity and systemic domination. This leads to the defining rupture between the two camps. Critical theory demands praxis. It is not enough to describe the world. The theoretical work must actively highlight opportunities for the social emancipation of human beings. To see how these epistemologies diverge in practice, we can apply them to the recurring motif of waiting in 20th century drama. Through a post-structuralist literary theory lens, waiting is a text exploring epistemological uncertainty. Characters stranded in a desolate landscape engage in endless language games, revealing the incapacity of free-floating signifiers to produce any stable truth. The text is a study of linguistic isolation. Pivot to a critical theory lens, applied to the exact same theatrical condition in the works of Anton Chekhov. Characters stranded in a provincial Russian town, waiting in vain for their lives to transform, are no longer abstract symbols of linguistic decay. Critical theory reframes their unfulfilled ideals as a material diagnosis. Their waiting is the symptom of bourgeois paralysis, and ideological metanarratives under late capitalism. Switching lenses transforms the object of study. The literary lens isolates the abstract human condition on the stage. The critical lens uses the stage to localize a critique of the economic structures operating outside the theater. We see this divergence again in readings of Shakespeare. Freud's psychoanalytic reading of Hamlet posits that the protagonist's famous delay in taking revenge is an internal, unconscious Oedipal conflict. The text is a map of individual psychological complexity. A new historicist reading abandons the internal psyche. It exposes how Renaissance plays served as models for state power, demonstrating how the ruling authorities permitted moments of subversion precisely so they could be visibly contained and crushed. Decoding the individual unconscious mind answers how the character operates. Mapping the systemic dynamics of the ruling society answers who the literature ultimately serves. During the academic theory wars of the 1970s and 80s, these separate disciplines converged. Critical theory effectively absorbed the linguistic and analytical tools of literary theory, creating the modern frameworks used today. Modern feminist theory weaponizes the analytical tools of deconstruction. Judith Butler applies these structuralist techniques to dismantle the gender binaries that have historically silenced voices. Post-colonial theory, pioneered by Edward Said, applies the meticulous techniques of close reading to historical archives and classic novels, exposing the power relations of imperialism. This is the finalized modern synthesis. Scholars deploy the interpretive mechanisms of literary theory strictly to achieve the emancipatory goals of critical theory. They deconstruct language to dismantle power. Literary theory treats the text as an end in itself. Critical theory treats the text as a symptom of the social whole. The distinction remains clear. To read formally is to understand the word, but to read critically is a demand to change the world.